Where's the coffee? Red Bull. My wife's getting coffee right now. She's. That's Aiden Essen playing. I know. I look like a complete weirdo in my thumbnail. What's happening? Greetings from Atlanta. There we go. Greetings from Vegas. Hey, everybody. Welcome on this this actually nice Saturday afternoon here in Atlanta. I don't know how it is where everybody else is. How about South Africa? What's the weather like there? It's nighttime. London, let's see, is it nighttime in London now? It's getting there. It's dark, okay. I know it's not dark in Brazil right now. Whose daughter listens to Neural every day? There you go. If your daughter listens to Neural, she's heard this piece if you listen to it enough. This is one of the ones on the Neural playlist that's not available anywhere. Hey, feel free to invite people. So I was talking to a friend of mine who had played one of my videos, one of my last videos that Michelle was here doing some, and she was moderating the other day, and so he said, I think you were kind of mean to Michelle, and I said, what? What do you mean? And he said, well, you just told her to do something. And I said, oh, well, I didn't mean to be. Anyways, but I had Michelle in my last video here doing this listening ear training thing. We're trying to tell the difference between an MP3 and a 44.1K wave file, which, by the way, brings me to what I was going to talk about. And what I was going to talk about is that one thing is that my record is available now through on 44.1 wave files. So if you want to go to the store and pick up my record that way, anybody that's bought my record and wants the wave file, let me know. Just write to me. Don't spoil the audio fooled posting. Oh, I won't. No, there's a test that you can take, and there's actually results from it, which I forgot to put in the because millions of people have taken this test, so you can see kind of what the average listener can hear and can't hear when it comes to the files, difference between wave files. The difference between 320 kilobits per second and 128 that's substantial. When you get to 128, you can definitely hear a difference in the top end. Basically above 16K is lopped off. If you can't hear 16K with a sine wave, that doesn't mean that you can't hear 16K with a square wave or with a more complex waveform. So that was one of the points that I did not make in the video. So I wanted to say that, and I don't know if I mentioned in it that a 44.1K wave file is 1,411 kilobits versus, let's say, 320 kilobits per second for a top end MP3, higher quality. And Apple uses the AAC file, which is a different type of compression algorithm. So a lot of this stuff is very esoteric to people. A lot of people are super passionate about it, kind of like the difference between the between Apple and Apple and PC. People have incredibly strong feelings about it. So, anyways, that's so check out the video and see what you think. I have obviously I don't know, some of you don't know that I've made my living. I mean, most of you know I make my living as a music producer. So we deal in files and different types of bit rates and things like that all the time, whether I'm mixing someone's project or, we'll get projects in here that are 96K that are massively big sessions that would have, cash me outside, that would have, 100 tracks I've gotten, things like that at 96K that are just unbelievably big files, 50 gigabytes for a session. But typically we mix down to a 24-bit 44K wave file. That's usually where it goes when it goes to mastering. Some people go to mastering with 48K files, but at some point it has to be dithered and the file has to get down to 44K. So that's so there's a lot of different factors involved here, but typically people present mastering engineers with 24-bit, either 44K, 48K, 88.1, 88.2, or 96K files. So anyways, so that's kind of the thing on that. If you haven't seen that video, check it out though. And like I said, my record now is available on WAV file, on 44.1 WAV files. So you can find it there. You can either buy the 320 kilobits per second download or the other one. So, I still maintain that well, watch my video. I won't tell you what I think about it. You can watch it and make a determination on your own. But one of the points that I made in the video is that most of your famous mix engineers that people hear on the radio that actually mix all the records that you hear, or that even people that the same guy that's been engineering and mixing every ECM record for the last 40 years, still does it. I mean, these people are in their 50s, 60s. Serban, who's a mixer, mixed a lot of Max Martin records. He's in his early 40s, but most guys are in their 40s and 50s and even 60s. So people that for sure have noise-induced sound hearing loss in the 4K range. They call it a 4K notch. Sometimes it might be 30 dB dip, and anybody here that's 50 years old, that's 45 years old, that's been that's it. You got it, Jan Erik. I don't know how to say his last name. Koj. Him. He's the guy that has been engineering and mixing all the ECM records for the last since the 70s. So. Anyways, even though people have, without a doubt, hearing damage, it does not affect the, it doesn't necessarily mean that it affects their hearing, because people begin to hear things in different ways and they use their brain in different ways. And you can teach your brain to hear things. This is what ear training is all about. Whether you're training yourself to hear dominant seventh, flat 9, 13 flat 9 chords, or, whatever you're training your ears to hear, it's all things that are learned. When I first started to produce, I remember thinking this thought, well, how do you decide if a snare sounds good or not? Because I had no idea. I mean, I'd listened to records forever, just like all of you. And I was like, okay, well, what's a kick drum supposed to sound like? What makes a kick drum sound good? I knew what I liked the sound of, but I didn't even have the vocabulary to describe it. I would use terms. I had this engineer Billy that I worked with when I first started. And yeah, don't listen to Lars Snare. And I would say to Billy, no, it needs to be more puffy sounding. And he said, what do you mean puffy? I said, it needs to have more. And I would make sounds like I think the kick drum should sound like. And then I would find examples of what I thought good kick drums sounded like. At the time, we were doing a lot of rock records. So this is in the late 90s or mid to late 90s. And I would bring in records by people whose mixes I thought sounded great. People like Brendan O'Brien or Andy Wallace or people like that were making great sounding rock records. And I remember, if I think about some of the records that had come out, like the first Rage Against the Machine record has incredibly good, really great drum sounds, or the Pearl Jam Versus record has incredibly good drum sounds. The kick drum, for example, there's a tune called Dissident that is a Pearl Jam tune, and it's got an amazing sounding drum sound, really. Audio Slave as well. I see that Oscar just said that. Yeah, incredibly good drum sounds. Supernatural, really present, a lot of punch to them. And the low end is just right, not woofiness, just great impact and that puff, that puffy sound on the bottom end. So my friend Billy would listen to it and he'd say, okay, I see what you're going for. And then he would do things and I'd say, no, that's it. Oh, that's it. And eventually when he'd find the thing, I knew that it sounded right, but I didn't have the vocabulary. And there are vocabularies for sonic things. There's things like, you can talk about warmth, or you can talk about, an extended low end, or you can talk about harshness. You can talk about sibilance, things like that. So these are things to describe what you're hearing if you don't have the knowledge to say, oh, that's harsh. And usually when something's harsh, it's around 3K, that is 3 to 4K. That there's so much of that. And as people, this is the interesting thing. As people age and they lose that frequency range, those frequencies tend to get painful. And I don't know why, but they tend to really hurt the listener. And every one of my friends that's my age that hears those sounds, and most of them don't overcompensate for that. It's not like they add a bunch of 3K to their mixes and they sound really harsh. What it is that they actually become sensitive to that frequency and they end up dialing it out because it actually hurts them when they hear that. And one of the reasons is that Ryder just said that there's a resonance at 3 to 4K. Those are the frequencies that are most present in speech. They're present in just about every instrument. You're going to hear that frequency range, which is why that area of the ear fatigues and you begin to lose that part of your hearing is because of that. Another thing too, with a lot of the square wave synth sounds that you hear in EDM music now, those are really, really fatiguing on the ear, and those things will I have friends that are DJs that have been live DJs. One of my really good friends was a DJ 25 years ago, did it for years in clubs, and he's pretty deaf in one ear because of it. A lot of it is a lot of these square wave synthesizer sounds are incredibly bad for your hearing. So these are things that you want to, as you get older, to really be careful of, is to protect your ears from that stuff. And it's interesting because I was talking, a friend of mine was in a session yesterday with Eric Valentine. I don't know if any of you know Eric Valentine. He's a producer and a great engineer. And Eric, he engineered the Queens of the Stone Age record. What is it? Songs for the Deaf. The one with what is it? No One Knows. Dun, 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 dun. What is that? What it is? No One Knows. That was called. Yeah. which has incredibly good guitar sounds on it. And they're not, it's hard to have present guitar sounds, songs for the deaf. It's hard to have present guitar sounds, no one knows, without having 3 to 4K in them. Because most sounds that really grab your ear on guitar, electric guitar, when you're talking about distorted electric guitar, have a lot of 3 to 4K. If you listen to Andy Wallace mixes, who gets great guitar sounds, you're going to have those really, really upper mid guitars biting through. That's what gives them aggression. Yet Eric Valentine gets a lot of these lower mids. You'll find a lot of mid-range down in the lower area, which is not fatiguing to the ear, and his records sound really powerful, I think. And the point is that you can turn them up incredibly loud. This is one of the things about that I think has changed, that I notice in the way records sound now versus when records were recorded on tape, digitally recorded records. When the first Pro Tools mix systems came out, and you would hear people that would use auto-tune on vocals. Well, auto-tune, the way it works, I believe, is that it changes the sample rate to find the pitch. If it's lower, it increases the sample rate, and it's above, it decreases the sample rate of the pitch to make it in tune. And auto-tune and a lot of digital recordings will have this weird 3.8K. It's like a knife hitting your ears. It's an artifact. It's like an out of tune artifact that is incredibly fatiguing on your ears and prevents people from turning up your music. Now, with young kids, it doesn't matter. Their ears are able to hear those songs. I mean, what it is, it's killing their hearing. But when you get older, those things, anything that's been auto-tuned sounds incredibly harsh to the ear, especially in that range. I would call it the 4K whistle. It's really the 3.84s where I would always find it. It would always be right around the same area. But it's the 4K whistle. And it's so fatiguing on the ears that it makes a lot of music unlistenable. And T-Pain indeed is right. It makes it unlistenable unless you go in and use a notch filter and get rid of that. And I've spent so much time over the years going in and spot EQing vocals to deal with this stuff. I'm not even talking about on vocals that have been auto-tuned. I'm talking about vocals in general. And certain particular singers, some of the best singers that I've worked with have incredibly shrill voices. There's a band, Need to Breathe, that I produced 3 records of, and the singer Bear is an amazingly great singer, but I would call him the knife, and I would have to go in and spot EQ every single E vocal sound, where that sound, because you close your throat, and for some reason it would produce this incredibly harsh sound that the only way that you could get rid of it is to go in with a notch filter, and the EQs that we would use, I call it a notch filter. A notch filter is just something that has an incredibly narrow width Q, okay? If you think of a bell curve. And then, so it'd be this really thin thing where you could take out a lot of, like a notch filter, you could take out at least 18 dB. And I would look for filters that you could take out 20, over 20, 24 dB, for example. There was a plugin by Metric Halo called Channel Strip that had a great EQ that you could take out a lot. Now they have things like Isotope, or even some of the waves, the Q10 or that Q series will have really narrow, bell curves to notch out those sounds. A notch filter is just an EQ that has a really high range and a very narrow Q, meaning that you can dial it in to just a tight frequency range. So I would literally go in, and most people that I know that are the top end mixers out there, and I've worked with I've had things mixed by everyone from Chris Lord-Alge, Tom Lord-Alge, Chad Blake, Andy Wallace, Randy Staub, Mark Endert, like every big mixer out there, Jack Joseph Puig, you name it. Many of these guys will have their assistants go in and they will go in and they will spot EQ the things before they even listen to it. And it's interesting. Chris Lord-Alge said that he puts on his Focusrite Red 3 mix bus EQ so that he doesn't have any. He puts it on first. So that there are no spikes, there's no sudden spikes. If you accidentally bump the volume knob and the music jumps out, and it can really damage your hearing by really sudden spikes in amplitude, and the compressor would catch that. Now somebody just wrote in there, wouldn't a multiband compressor take care of that? Absolutely, a multiband compressor is a de-esser. But what you don't want to do is you don't want to de-ess a sound, and I'll tell you why. I mean, de-essers are good. I use de-essers all the time, but for these kind of things, because they tend to be in different ranges, de-essers really work better in higher frequencies. When you're using them, you can use them as a plug-in, and you can automate them, and you're grabbing things above, let's say 6K, 8K in that area for S's. I'm talking about incredible harshness between 3 and 4K. Those are the things where you want to notch out. But if you notch out if you take the whole vocal and take it out, it dramatically affects the sound of the vocal because all the presence is in that area as well. That's where the speech intelligibility is. So what I would do is I would take it, I would dial in depending on who the singer was, I would dial in I would take a track and I would run it down I'd find that thing and I'd run the notch filter all the way down on the track. And then I would have that track above the comped vocal track. I'd take the comp vocal track and do that. And then any word that was really irritating, I would just slide in. I'd go through and I'd slide anything that was fatiguing to the ear or have my assistant do it. Then I'd come back and listen. And then any words that didn't sound right, I would go back in, and then I would specifically sit there and notch line by line, notch out anything that was offensive to the ear, making it where, and I would have, I hate to say this, okay, I'll admit this, I would have my assistant come in there and sit, or whoever was there on the studio, because I'm much older than them. And I would have them listen to these things and turn them up and say, is this painful to you? Do you hear that? And it's funny because if you take this and you can hear that 4K whistle. I would have them and I would teach them this. I'd say, check this out. So put this notch filter on and let's go back, and I would highlight a particular vocal note. And it happens in other instruments, but it's really noticeable in vocals. So I would have them just loop a certain part with the same thing, and you could sidechain it, Clinton. You can sidechain it and automate it. But the thing is that a lot of times, if I'm working on a major label record, the stuff is going to be mixed by someone. I want to send a complete edited vocal that has already had these things done to them, okay, that are already spot EQ'd, because you don't want, because a lot of times these guys are not going to do that, and they're going to, or if they are going to do that, this is the thing, you don't want a mixer. If Chris Lord-Alge is going to mix one of my tracks, I don't want his assistant spending 2 hours doing this on a vocal that he could be spending mixing the track. So, because typically they will do their setup at the same time with the next song, and a lot of times he'll mix 2 songs in a day, and they'll do, he'll mix a song in the morning, spend 3-4 hours on it, then he'll go out for lunch, and his assistant will do the setup for the next one, and he will do that. So I will go in and spot EQ everything, so that when you put on the vocal, everything sounds great, and different syllables will have different harshness and different frequencies. Now, Not everybody's voice is like that. If you go back and look at the Sound on Sound that who mixed the Adele 21 record? It was Elmhurst, Todd Elmhurst, Tom Elmhurst. So he had a picture of Adele's vocal EQ. It was a Q4, I think, or a Q10 EQ. He had 18 dB of 930K taken out. He had 18 dB of 1.6K taken out. And he had, I think, 24 dB of 3.1K taken out of her voice. Now, it's really a massive, massive cut in the voice and changes the character. But the reason that he did this is because her voice, this is before she had her vocal surgery, and you can still hear it. It's incredibly harsh, and I love Adele singing. But those frequencies, he's cutting until they don't sound harsh anymore. And he's, he knows you just cut this stuff. Well, the thing is that we didn't used to use notch filters really back in the, we use them for certain things back on tape, but you don't get those same frequencies spikes on tape. And I have 24 tracks or multi-tracks of so many famous songs. And when I go back and solo the vocal of Chris Cornell on something off Super Unknown, his voice is not harsh. It sounds phenomenal. When I listen to Eddie Vedder's voice on something from the first Pearl Jam record, it sounds great. There's no harshness at all in it. They've got incredible clarity to it, everything. But there's not that whistle. There's not that super high frequency thing that's killing you. Anyway, so all of these things, let me tie it into what I talked about as far as remembering things. Like, how do you actually remember all this stuff? Because when you go in and you are trying to learn these things to do for as an engineer, as a musician, trying to retain knowledge, because all of this stuff, whether it's knowledge on mixing, whether it's knowledge on classical music theory, whether it's knowledge on jazz music theory, all of this is about repetition and memory. You have to experience something to remember it. The best way of learning something is to teach it. Okay, that's really somebody put in a comment here on one of my videos an old Confucius saying that I hadn't heard in a long time, and it's I see and I forget, I hear and I remember, I do and I understand. You learn by doing. There's a thing called constructivism. It's a type of learning. It's really the school that my kids go to is a constructivist-based school. It's a whole concept in teaching through doing. They don't believe in a lot of homework. It's through experience. Luke just said writing etudes. Bach did not teach. He didn't write etudes. He wrote the Well-Tempered Clavier. These were his teaching pieces. I've been thinking about, well, how do I teach people the rules of counterpoint, which are incredibly boring, and there's so many of them that they're almost impossible to remember. So I've been thinking about how to attack this. And some of these will not make for great videos. They're just not that interesting. So I started preparing for the video that I'm going to put out tomorrow, okay, which is my first video on counterpoint and four-part writing, SATB writing. So I sat down last night and I took this book. This is a book of Bach chorales, okay? If you want to learn, there's 371 four-part Bach chorales here. This is a book that you guys should get because This is the second volume, so it does chorales 199 through 371. These are for piano. They can be for voice. They can really be for anything. So, so I was thinking about, I've took this and I programmed it for a string orchestra. I'm going to play it for you right now. Okay, that's in G major. I figured I'd take an easy key. So, I figured that the way to do this is to actually take it and then change some of the parts so that they have some parallel fifths and parallel octaves and actually make it not right. So, that way, when you hear it done incorrectly, it's going to stick with you a lot better. You can't learn this stuff by learning the rules. You have to actually hear it. And you have to not just see it, but you got to hear what it sounds like wrong, and then you have to hear what it sounds like done correctly. So anyways, so that's what you have coming up is that I'm going to talk about this piece in particular. And so somebody just writes, how do I apply counterpoint to jazz harmony? Well, the first thing you do is you learn these basic rules of 17th century counterpoint, which is basically what, the rules of Bach's 4-part writing. Once you've learned those, how the voices move independently, how the lines move, what the voice leading should be, and how the harmonic progressions work, then you move on to things. But I always use this example. Knowing how to voice a chord, if you're doing a pop song or something and you have an F major chord, and your bass player plays F, or you're playing keyboards and instead of playing F in the bass, you play A in the bass, so first inversion chord. So what you don't want to do is then have that same note, that A, the third of the chord, in the melody. And the reason that you don't is because having these doubled thirds make the chords sound weaker. So typically when you have a first inversion major chord, you're going to have the either 2 roots and a fifth, 2 fifths and a root, or 3 roots. Okay? Typically it'll be some combination of these, but you're not going to have a doubled third. You're not going to have a third in the melody and a third in the bass. Okay? This is where you get into really weird part writing. It will just not sound right. Until you hear that, though, you don't realize it. But one place you can, how many of you are actual guitar players on here? If you're guitar players and you play a chord like this, let's say I play this chord right here. This is the chord that you first learn when you're learning a little folk guitar, right? You learn your old G there with the open B string. Well, most rock players then will play, and they'll add this note here, this D to this. Why do they add that D to that note? I tell you why. Because there's a B here, and if you play an open thing, you have 2 B's in the chord. That's 2/3. So it sounds, that actually weakens the chord. You want to have only 1 B in that chord. So That's a very simple example. It actually makes the chord not have a center when you have a doubled third in a chord. So when you're doing an arrangement, whether you're doing a pop arrangement, if you're Max Martin, if you're whoever you are that's doing a song, and your bass player decides to go to the third on a major chord, okay, and the melody is singing the third, it's going to sound bad. If the melody is singing the fifth of the chord, that will work great, but playing the third and the bass. But you have to be aware of what the melody is. So that's why when I'm tracking a song, I always have a scratch vocal on it first, so that you're always hearing what the melody is, so that you know if the bass player is doing any inversions, that it's not competing with the melody. And somebody just wrote about Paul McCartney. Well, Paul McCartney, from the middle period on in the bass, he realized not only does the bass sound better when it has its own track and done last, but he would do the bass last. So he would hear the entire arrangement with all the vocals and harmony parts, and he would be able to do all these crazy things in the bass part because he knew that it wasn't competing with the melody. Okay, so you'd get a lot of inversions and things like that. And these are things that you just need to know about part writing that you will learn from learning basic four-part writing, SATB. When you hear that term, soprano, alto, tenor, bass, that's all that means. So that is the way that I figured that is going to be the easiest way to teach 17th or 18th century counterpoint, basically the counterpoint of Bach, okay, is to learn these rules by showing you what the rule is, then doing it incorrectly and playing it for you, and then correcting it again and playing it for you so that you can actually hear what the difference is. Because once you do hear the difference, you'll say, oh, well, that's obvious. All of these things that that you learn in here can be used in any kind of writing. When I'm having people do harmonies, for example, on a tune, you're doing an R&B tune, it does not matter. Knowing what the melody note is will determine what other notes are good to harmonize. For example, the sixth on a major chord is almost never a good note to sing in the melody on a song, on a commercial song. You'll almost never hear it except in passing or occasionally, because it's, number one, it's almost impossible. You'll never hear it in the chorus, or rarely hear it in the chorus of a song, because it's pretty much impossible to harmonize. I'm not talking about sixth intervals. I'm talking about the sixth of the chord. So if you have an A major chord singing an F sharp is a very weak note, because that note is the third of the four chord in the key, the D chord. It's really a defining note, okay? So if you use on the A, it makes it sound like that it's trying to be a D chord. And your notes for harmony, if you harmonize it with above, you've got the note A, if it's a third above, that's the tonic, which also happens to be the fifth of the A chord. So you have two notes of the A chord instead of what you want to have is you have two notes of the D chord, right? If you got F sharp and A, which is you're really describing the D chord. You can think of it as, I've got the root and the sixth of an A chord. Well, no, you've got actually the two most important notes of a D chord. And what's your other possible harmony? Well, you could put the third against it, the C sharp against the F sharp, but that sounds really bad on an A chord to have the third and the sixth together. You could put a D there, but then you're really sounding out a D major chord there. So that is one of the reasons why the sixth of the chord, meaning the sixth interval from the root, so on an A major chord, the note F sharp, that note is a bad note to use in the melody. Okay, so if you were to go through and say, okay, I'm going to look at every Max Martin tune and analyze the melody, or I'm going to look at every Beatles tune and analyze the melody, you will rarely find songs that actually have the sixth and the melody in an important place. It'll generally be places that where there are ad libs. I can think of it in, I can think of it in a few songs, but almost never. And harmonies do not sound good on it. You never hear it in Nashville on country songs. You just don't hear it. So I'm not talking about sixths. I'm not talking about the interval of a sixth. Like if I were to go from C sharp to A, that interval of a sixth, okay? That's a different thing. That's the interval of a sixth. I'm talking about the relationship between the root of the chord and the melody note. Anyway, so by the way, my book, the Beato book, I'm running a sale right now on it, which I do a lot of times on here. I have a discount. Let's see here. It'll only be good for 24 hours. Let's see here. $10 off my Beato book. AP724 is the discount code. And I have a $10 off on my what is it? My PDF, which is 68 pages, and book together. And that code is RB375. So if you guys are interested in getting my book, my PDF, you can. There's a discount here. So also, what book? My Beato book. Could I talk about Eric Dolphy? Any discounts on courses? No discounts on my course yet. Anyways, it hasn't been out long enough. So, and I'm working on my next course, which is a guitar course. You can find the book on my website at rickbeato.com. It's in the store. Now, somebody said G6 is all over the Beatles. The Beatles use sixth chords or six chords, right? Like, for example, of I Want to Hold Your Hand ends on an A6. But you don't hear the sixth in the melody on a lot of these songs. And you will not hear them harmonized because it doesn't, for the exact reasons that I said. These are things about part writing, but these are things that you will hear. Oh, thanks for that. It's awesome, man. These are things that you will hear when you are studying this counterpoint, these rules of counterpoint here. Your ear will just naturally gravitate towards this stuff, and you'll say, oh, that doesn't sound right. It has nothing to do, you don't think about this. You won't saying, it just won't, you won't think about the theory of it. It'll just not sound right to you once you've done it enough. Once you've worked on these 4-part examples enough, these rules will just become natural where you're not thinking about it. What's the title of the book? It's my book, the Beato book. Wrong can be right. Now, there are rules that you do, there are rules that you break later on. Now, mostly when you're talking about modern classical music or you're talking about modern film scoring, you'll have parallel fifths all over the place. This is very common. The Bach book, sorry. The Bach book is just called, it's a series. It's by Calmus is the company, but they're Bach chorales, 4-part chorales, 371. But there's a volume 1, it goes up to 198. So you guys see that? These are great books to have. The chorales are incredibly short. All of them are. Here's a long one, 227. As you can see, it's really just 3 lines, 2, 3. So there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12. It's like 18 bars with a pickup. That's nothing. That's a particularly long one. There's one here, 228 is really, there's a pickup, right? But you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bars. These are great things to analyze right here. Is to take just a short single line piece like this and go through and analyze what the notes are. What are the chords? They're very easy. If you can just read bass and treble clef, that's in C major. The first chord, let's see, oh, there's an A in the bass, and you're in you have no sharps or flats, so that's probably in A minor. Well, let's check it out. What are the other notes on the chord? C, E, A. So the first chord here is an A minor. So you know the piece is in A minor. So you have you have A, you have C, you have E, and you have A. So you have 2 A's, so 2 roots, a third, and a fifth. Okay? Then you say, what is the next chord? And you look at it. Okay? So you see, you got an A, you have an E, you have an A, and you have a C. Okay, that's still A minor. So this is kind of how you go through and you do analysis on these things. You can analyze the chords, you write the Roman numerals above them, and then you look at and then you just look at the parts. You look at the spacing. What are the notes? What are the spacings? Are there any parallel fifths that you can see in there? Are there any parallel octaves, between non-adjacent voices, for example? Are there, you could, when I go through my course and get to it, I'll explain all of these. But these are, these are actually available for free on the internet, these 2 parts. I like this. I like buying books like this because I can write in the book. And does Bach gent? Bach was the original gent organist. He gented on the organ. I guarantee you that Bach had a distorted organ. And he was playing, he was jamming, and they were over, the bellows were kind of overplaying, and he was getting distortion. He had to be, right? I mean, there had to be a way that people got distortion back in the day when they were playing, and they had people with distorted voices, for sure. Think about it. People were singing. There were probably people with raspy voices that Bach heard that were singing like Chris Cornell. And he probably thought, whoa, that is amazing. I'm sure that there were people like that, right? Somebody sliced the bellows with a razor. Well, the problem with the bellows, if they get a hole in it, is that they don't hold air and you can't produce a note. Because I have a pump organ back here. This is my second pump organ that I've gotten. My first one developed a hole in the bellows that couldn't get repaired because they eventually rot. And because they rot, they once they start getting enough holes in it, they just won't hold air, and it can't push any air through the reeds. So harpsichord is gent for sure. So do organs. I mean, organs definitely gent, no question about that. He had to have been playing power chords and stuff on the organ at some point. I guarantee some sus2 chords. He must have, and thought, wow, that sounds cool, but I can't do that. I got to figure out how to make that work. Anyway, so my Beato album, I'm going to remind you, is available now. Preludes and Etudes. You can find it on my website, $10. You can get the WAV files if you'd like. If you can hear the difference between WAV files and 320 MP3s, then you can buy both. Either one, doesn't matter. The discount on the Beato book for the next 24 hours, $10 off, AP724. And if you want to buy the Beato book and my 68-page PDF, $10 off on that. It's already discounted, so it's the lowest price it's ever been. It'd be the code is RB375. Anyways, volume 2 on my record. Yes, I actually have a second volume of pieces, but I'm not going to put it out yet. My book is for beginners to advanced. It actually starts with basically how to name an interval. So Tony, I did not get in touch with Brett yet. I need to write to Brett. I've been super busy the last couple days. somebody said Lee Morgan documentary. Somebody that saw. You know what? I really want to see the Lee Morgan documentary. Where did you see it? Is it available to buy on iTunes or anything like that, or on Google Play or whatever? Where I don't know where you buy stuff like that. What is it called? Lee Morgan was a trumpet player that played with John Coltrane. He was a great bebop trumpet player, hard bop trumpet player that played on Blue Train and played one of the greatest solos on the tune Blue Train. It's on Netflix. Fantastic. He died. I remember this. He was killed in a club, I believe, called Slugs. He was shot by his wife or his girlfriend when he was, oh, geez, I don't even think he was 30 years old. Was he? Carlos, did you watch it? How old was Lee when he died? He was shot on the bandstand, either by his girlfriend or his wife. I can't remember. But I remember the club was called Slugs, which is terrible place to die. You don't want to die at a place called Slugs. You don't want to die in the bandstand. Anybody? Like Dimebag, right, exactly. I mean, it's terrible. I mean, you know, this is a complete non sequitur, but there's a musician around here, famous musician around Atlanta, Colonel Bruce Hampton, who has really started a lot of the jam band guys like Victor Wooten, just jam band guys, but Victor Wooten and Jimmy Herring and people like that. Colonel Bruce had his 70th birthday party last year, and he was on stage during the encore, and it was a benefit. There were 4,000 people there. He had Derek Trucks, all these people playing, O'Teal, I mean, all these people were playing, and Colonel Bruce died on stage during the encore. And it was, I thought about it. I mean, I wasn't there. I have friends that were there, and it was tragic. But if you're going to die someplace, your 70th birthday in a sold-out club, during the encore on stage, having a heart attack and dying, and with all your friends there, it's hard to be sad about that. I mean, I'm sure Colonel Bruce would have loved to have lived another 10 years or something, but if you said to him 20 years ago, hey, this is how you're going to die, Colonel Bruce. You're going to, when you're 7 years old, they're going to have a birthday party at the Fox Theater with 4,500 people there. You're going to be on stage with all these musicians that came up through your band and are super famous. And anyways, it's that would be a great way to go. Him Morgan. I call him Morgan. That's what it's called. Okay, I'm gonna watch that tonight. That would be a great thing to do. I am gonna do a sounding off with Tosin. Okay. The guys. Okay, discount for the Beato book once again is AP724, $10 off for 24 hours. Tosin went to the Atlanta Institute of Music, AIM. I think they call it AIMM now, and they wanted me to do a sounding off with Tosin live in front of the people from the school there. So, that's I've talked to them about it, and or they've talked to me about doing it. So that's kind of how we're going to do it, I think. So we just need to schedule that. I got to remember to do that. Those of you that are fans of Tosin, put it in the comments to remind me to make that happen this week. Fleet Foxes. Yeah, I like Fleet Foxes. Do I know any REM? Of course I know REM. I love REM. Let me think here. Let's see. There's a song on, I love REM. I haven't thought about REM in a long time. There's a song on, there is a song on Automatic for the People called Try Not to Breathe. And it's one of my favorite melodies. It is a perfect melody. Any of you guys know that song? Okay, people are asking me all these different questions. Try Not to Breathe. That is an amazingly great song. What do I think of Eddie Vedder? One of my favorite singers ever. As a matter of fact, this morning I took my girls out to get their hair cut. And my daughter Layla, my 4-year-old, loves the Tom Petty, The Waiting by Tom Petty, but with Eddie Vedder singing, which is one of the best covers ever. And it's from 2006, and Eddie Vedder is unbelievably great in it. It's literally one of my favorite covers. And there's another Tom Petty cover that John Mayer did with David Ryan Harris, and I forget who the dobro player was, where he does Free Falling. Any of you seen that? Because it's a great cover of Free Falling. It's just a 3-piece. And David Ryan Harris is a super guy from Atlanta here. I love Davis. I mean, David, he's I need to get him on the show on Sounding Off. I've known him for years and years. He's an incredibly great guy and just a great guitar player and singer. Anyways, but John's cover of Free Falling is, I don't know when it's from. I want to say it's probably from 2008, maybe, something like that. Anyways, so 2007, Smitty said that. Okay, yeah, that is a really, really great cover. I've been on a real Tom Petty binge lately. I was very, very depressed with Tom's death, and he's, he's one of the greatest melody writers ever. Somebody says, do you know Guthrie Govan? I emailed Guthrie about coming on the show. He said he'd love to. He's been out on tour. He's been on tour with Hans Zimmer, and he said he would gladly be on. Somebody says, do I know Andy Timmons? Actually, I have a lot of friends that are friends with Andy Timmons. And he's a great guitar player. And apparently a great guy. Everybody that I've talked to that knows him. So, anyways, so that's, I didn't really get to my topic about remembering things. Tom Quayle. If anybody knows Tom, have him email me, because I don't know how to get in touch with him. Tom Quayle. I like Tom's playing. I watch his YouTube channel. I subscribe to a lot of people's YouTube channels, actually. I love Steve Lukather. Who needs topics? You got to put something down, though. Remembering the topic is about remembering. Exactly. Can I put links to my book in the description? Just go to rickbeato.com and you can find it there. I'm coming up. I've got 1 minute and 30 seconds left. So talk to me here. What do you want to hear? Who do you want me to have on here? Like my video. The 400 people that are on right now. Can you click the like button so I get more likes than 225? There's 400 people, 396 people on, but only 235 likes. Click the like button, like button, like button, like button. Greg Howe, Iden. I'm going to have Iden on. Iden's going to be on live here when he comes to town in a few weeks. He's going to be right here in this studio, and we're going to go live. Would I have a Brazilian on Sounding Off? Of course I would. I'm a massive fan of Brazilian music, and Guthrie, I know that. Mike Patton, ooh, that'd be cool. Tom Quayle was at Guitar Con. What was that? Seemed approachable. You tried his social media. I never think that I'm not sure how you write to people on YouTube. Nobody checks their messages on YouTube anyways. I always forget to check mine, honestly. If anybody writes to me, I love Rick Graham. He's awesome. I don't know. And Warren I already interviewed. I'm going to put Warren's video out probably this week. I just have to put it together. Okay, that's all. Everybody, you guys rock. This is great. Notch Frequencies. Buy my book. Buy my record. You guys are awesome. This is one of the best videos that I've had, live videos right here. Okay, I'm signing off. Thanks. Bye.